Welcome to the Busy Latter-day Saint, where righteous desires and living life come together. Here, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints discuss their challenges and successes in studying the Scriptures. I'm your host, Richard Bernard. The music for this program is by Marvin Goldstein and used with his permission. If you've enjoyed this podcast, I encourage you to comment on this episode or the podcast in general. To leave a comment, click on the link in the show notes. Because I'm not posting a weekly episode, I encourage you to subscribe to the podcast to be informed when a new episode has been posted. You subscribe by tapping on the subscribe or follow button. Each podcast app is different, so if you don't see the follow or subscribe button, a simple Google search will show you how. If you enjoy this podcast and have benefited from it, I encourage you to start donating a few dollars to the General Missionary Fund each month. This podcast has listeners throughout the world, and recently Murray from Australia emailed me suggesting that I have him as a guest on the podcast. Well, I never turned down such a request, so Murray joins us from down under, making this episode special because it's my first interview with someone outside of the United States. And in a few weeks, I'll be speaking to another Aussie referred to me by Murray. By the way, if you're listening to this podcast from outside the United States and would like to be a guest on the podcast, email me at help@thebusylatterdaysaint.com. Now, there's no hyphen between latter and day. It's just all one word. So it's just thebusylatterdaysaint.com. So help@thebusylatterdaysaint.com. Now, getting back to Murray, he was a delight to talk to, and by the end of the interview, I felt that I was meeting with an old friend. And now, here's Murray. Well, Murray, welcome to the podcast. You have I guess a dubious honor of being the first podcast of mine that's outside the United States. Where are you located?
I'm located in Australia. I live in a little town called Lara, which is part of a bigger town called Geelong, or Geelong, as Americans might like to say it, which is near a much larger city called Melbourne, or Melbourne, as an Australian would say it. So Melbourne is a very big city. It's about 5 million people. Geelong is a much smaller city of about 250,000. And my little town of Lara is probably about 10,000 people.
All right. And you're at the really the southern tip of Australia.
Yes, we are. So we have what you'd call a Mediterranean type climate. It gets quite...
Yeah, and in fact, it's summertime there now for you.
Not quite.
Not quite. Okay.
It's late spring. So officially for us, December is the start of summer.
Okay. So are you throwing snags on the Barbie now?
Not yet. And that's not something that all Australians do, but some will be for sure.
Yeah, I have in front of me a list of about 100. They call them slang from Australia. Very interesting. Your afternoons are arvo. Is that correct? Arvo. Yeah, arvo.
Yep.
And you're I guess too old to have any ankle biters in your house.
Yes, my wife and I are what you'd call empty nesters. I think that's a common.
Yeah.
I think that might be a common saying that we have.
Well, now. Tell me a little bit about your family.
Okay, well, my wife, Margot, and I have been married for 25 years, coming up to 26 years in January the 6th. We married in 1996. And we have one daughter. Her name is Miriam, and she recently married. She's a return missionary, and she married another return missionary. They married in the Melbourne Temple, and they are living across the bay from us. We say it's across the bay. It's about an hour and a half drive, and we haven't actually been to their place yet.
Oh, okay.
So she's mid-20s. 24,
Okay.
25, and she married a young return missionary who's about the same age, a couple of years older.
Now, where did she serve?
She served in the Sydney North Mission,
Oh,
so
okay.
Sydney, Australia, um, and that at the time Sydney was divided into two missions. It's since been combined back into one mission.
Oh,
Yeah, so she served, pretty much as soon as she turned 19, I think. And yeah, so she really enjoyed her mission. I can still remember sitting in sacrament meeting with her sitting beside me when it was announced that sisters could go on missions when they turned 19 instead of waiting till 21.
mm-hmm.
And she grabbed me excitedly, says, "Dad, I can go on a mission now." She didn't want to wait till she didn't want to wait till she was 21. But she was happy to go at 19, and I was so glad that that policy was changed.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it just seemed like a long wait, and I think I don't know what you see over there in the States, Richard, but I think we seem to have a more success in keeping young men active than young women active,
Mm-hmm.
because the young men finish high school
Yeah.
and they're off on their mission straight away. That they didn't have to wait, and the prospect of waiting 3 years after high school
Yes.
to go on a mission,
Yes.
there was no immediate goal, and not a church related goal perhaps anyway. So I think that was just a great decision to change that policy.
Yes. And she found her husband there.
No, she didn't
Oh,
find
no.
a husband.
Okay.
No, he served in Finland.
Oh, Finland. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
So long way. You couldn't get further. It would be hard to get further away from Australia than Finland.
Yes, I would actually agree with that. I was told when I worked at the MTC here in Provo that Finnish was one of the most difficult languages to learn. And this goes back several years, but someone who is a native to Finland worked at the MTC, to help the missionaries practice their lessons. And he said he was blown away by how well these missionaries could speak Finnish, and he wondered what the secret was. Well, the Lord kind of took care of that, but yeah, I've been told it's something about the verbs, I think, that makes it very, very difficult to speak. Well, now, what do you told me you were semi-retired as a salesman, but I guess, have been selling all sorts of different things.
Yeah. I tell people I'm trying to retire, and I'm not doing a very good job of it. It's hard to retire, but as of February or March next year, the Lord will take care of that, because my wife and I will be starting our MTC training and serving a mission. One thing I must say, Richard, before we get too much into that, I have one other daughter.
Oh.
There's a surprise for you. So Margot is my second wife. My first marriage ended after a few years, and I have a daughter from my first marriage who is a young 32-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
I think she turns 33 very soon, actually, in a couple of weeks. Yeah. So you'd be interested in this. She's a musician.
Oh.
And she's at university at the moment studying music composition.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so she's a psychiatric nurse, but very talented musically. I laughingly say she gets her musical talent from me, but she actually, if you heard me sing, you wouldn't say that. So yeah, she got a musical talent from her mother, but she's studying music composition with the hope of using that for sort of music therapy with her psychiatric.
Yeah. Now,
patients.
what instruments does she play?
Well, her first instrument was flute. She studied flute at high school, and she sort of self-taught keyboards, but she's having to learn keyboards properly now, doing her music composition degree, and she's self-taught guitar.
Oh, okay.
So she's a multi-instrumentalist, I guess you'd
Yes,
say,
yes.
and she has a beautiful voice as well.
Oh, well, I think that's wonderful. I think music is very important, very, very important in all of our lives, especially
Yeah.
with the hymns and everything. But I guess as you probably know, that's what my degree in is music. And in fact, I just started my taking organ lessons again after
Oh, really?
decades, because I've been called to play the organ in the for the ward. There's four of us, so we each go, once a month to play. But I just figured I've been doing it for about a year, and figured I've got to get some help. I've got to play. I got to do better. So
Well,
anyway,
that,
I had my first lesson, and I really, really enjoyed it. I haven't had a music lesson in decades, but it was very enjoyable.
that's fantastic. And the good thing about only playing once a month, you could have a whole month to practice those hymns that you play.
Yes, that's exactly what I do. I work at it very hard. Really, the other organists are much better than I am. I don't know why they asked me to do it, but they have, and so I decided, well, I'm going to go back to school and start putting it all together. Well, now you said
Fantastic.
that you worked with micro businesses. What is that?
So a micro business in Australia, we have these, sort of terms for different size businesses, and a small business could be, and I'm not sure of the technical division here, but a micro business is one, two, three employees,
Oh, okay.
four employees maybe.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't qualify to be called a small business until
Mm-hmm.
maybe 20 employees or something like that. Perhaps I'm
Okay.
not sure exactly where the division lies.
Yeah.
But one thing you'll find in Australia, perhaps perhaps compared with the US, I'm not sure, is that a lot of church members in Australia are self-employed
Oh, I did not know
or
that.
work or work in very small businesses. And part of the reason for that, I think, is that, and this would be interesting for you to comprehend coming from Utah, where you are. The Australia population of Australia is about 25 million. In the last census, which was 2016, about 60,000 people self-identified as Latter-day Saints,
Hmm.
which makes that about 0.25% of the population, roughly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The number of members on the church records in Australia is about 130,000. So, we have about 50% of that number self-identifying as Latter-day Saints.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're a very, very small part of the population. We're one of the smallest religions in the country. And we tend not to fit in very well.
Ah.
So in the big corporate environments, and I worked in one of the biggest corporations in Australia, our national telecommunications carrier back in the 80s, we just don't fit in that well because, number one, we don't drink alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And so, not fitting in that well, you just don't feel all that comfortable sometimes. So a lot of Latter-day Saints here tend to be fairly entrepreneurial and think about, well, how can I get out of this situation in this big
Yeah.
corporation where I don't fit in that well, and
Mm-hmm.
what can I do to, start my own business and
Yeah.
be self-employed? So,
Now, is alcohol big in Australia? I mean, do most people drink?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah. And when you say you don't drink, people say, so you don't drink at all? Well, I drink water, I drink fruit juice,
Yeah.
um, oh, well, can I give you a tea or coffee? No, 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 I don't drink those either. Okay, well, we are what we call in Australia a cheap shout.
Ah, I see.
So,
Well, now, some information you sent me, you said that small businesses, even surfing hardware. Do you surf?
yes, yes, I grew up. So Geelong is about 15, 20 k's from the coast. So I grew up in Geelong, and I didn't really like competitive sports all that much. Although I was a very good table tennis player, but in my very early teenage years, my dad and I bought some surfboards. Well, let's say my dad bought two surfboards. So we had one each, and we went surfing. And so I started surfing proper surfboards when I was probably 13 years old, about that first year of high school. Although we'd grown up going to the beach as children all the time, because that's what you do in the school holidays. As a family, you'd go to the beach. And so I was doing what people would recognise as regular surfing for a long time. And then in more recent times, I got into wind sports. So kite surfing particularly.
Oh, okay.
Which is, you might not have any comprehension about what kite surfing is, but you have a rather large kite, which is about, 9 or 10 square meters, flying on lines that are about 25 meters from you. You're hooked into a harness and you stand on a board and off you go across the water.
Yes,
Yes.
I've seen those, and
really?
and we have those here. I was curious about the surfing because I did look at the map where you live, and it amazes me how big Australia is, by the way. But anyway, you're actually in a very large bay or harbor. So where do you go to surf where you have the waves?
Okay, so yeah, we live on Port Phillip Bay. Corio Bay is a small part of Port Phillip Bay, but across the peninsula that forms the bay is the ocean.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we drive across the peninsula and we're at the ocean. From where I live in Lara, it's about a half-hour drive.
Oh, okay.
From the middle of Geelong, it's about a 15, 20-minute drive, although that drive has become longer because of all the traffic lights that have been put in recent times. But, it's not that far.
So they're trying to slow you down a little bit.
Well, there's been massive housing developments in the area. So all those housing developments have created a lot more traffic and intersections which need traffic control. So they've slowed us down a lot. Yeah.
Now, church-wise, what callings have you held?
Look, a variety of different callings. Nothing terribly exceptional, I guess I'd say. My wife and I are currently serving as stake temple and family history consultants, and we enjoy that calling. It's not a terribly demanding calling, but it's interesting. My wife is also the director of the Family History Centre at our ward. Well, it's a stake family history centre. It's controlled by the stake, but it's in our ward building. And that was a busy thing for her, 2 or 3 days a week in the Family History Centre, pre-COVID. So for the last 2 years, basically, that really hasn't been operating. Yeah. We're just coming out of lockdown. Melbourne, by the way, has been, according to reports, the most locked down city in the whole world.
Oh, I hadn't read that.
Oh, it's been an interesting time here. We've had, and fortunately, because we live outside what we call metropolitan Melbourne, we live in regional Victoria. So Melbourne and Geelong, we're in the state of Victoria. Fortunately, living outside metropolitan Melbourne, rather, we haven't been quite so affected. But there have been curfews where people haven't been out past 9 o'clock at night. They've had 5 kilometre limits in which they could travel within, and we've had months of being locked down. So, the economy has really, really suffered because of that. A lot of people working from home, etc. But just back to the surfing hardware business, it's actually been good for us because where our surf business is located in Torquay, there's been lots of people who would normally be travelling to Melbourne for work. It's about an hour and a half to 2 hours commute. They've been working from home, and in Torquay, working from home is sort of code for I can go surfing whenever I like, as long as I'm at my meetings or on my phone when I need to be.
Right.
So sales of surfing equipment, and we sell all the weird sort of stuff like stand-up paddleboards, kite surfing equipment, foil surfing equipment. We've had really strong sales for the last 2 years.
Very good.
It's been great.
Very
been
good.
Great. Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
is the Melbourne Temple open?
It's reopening in early December.
Oh,
It's
okay.
been open off and on through lockdowns. And I mentioned earlier about my youngest daughter marrying in the temple. Um, she had two dates cancelled, and there was a very short break between lockdowns. There was a week break between lockdowns, and the temple, I think, phoned them and said, you can get married this week, or it might have been the other way around. I can't remember how it worked. But anyway, they chose the Saturday to get married, and I think the temple was planning on being open for the coming week after that
Mm-hmm.
Saturday, and the temple's presidency suggested, oh, why don't you wait till sort of midweek or next Saturday? And they said, no, we want to get married this
Yeah.
Saturday because we know. And fortunately they did, because within a few days the temple was closed again.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so hard. You want to get married and it gets scheduled and put off and scheduled and put off. It's like
Oh,
I
yeah.
can only imagine the frustration. Now, what about your
Mm.
sacrament meetings? Are you actually meeting in the chapel?
Yes, we're back having meetings now. I think for the last 3 weeks or so we've had our meetings in the chapel with limits on numbers, and only people who are double vaxxed uh,
Oh,
can come to the. So what we're actually doing in our ward, we're actually having two meetings: one for the vaxxed, double vaxxed, and one for the unvaxxed.
wow. No,
Um,
that's interesting. Now, when you say a double vax, obviously you're meaning vaccinations.
yeah.
When you say a double, you mean it's a vaccination that normally one person would just need one and that's it, but you have to go back and get it again, or are you,
Well,
or is the second one the booster?
yeah, the second one's, I guess, the booster.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
so
all right.
the most popular vaccine, well, the approved vaccines in Australia at the moment, and the ones that were approved from the start, are the Pfizer vaccine and the AstraZeneca vaccine.
Yeah.
Moderna has been approved recently, and I think there might be another one being approved as well. But they're all two shots. You need to have your first shot and then your second shot 2 or 3 months later, something like that.
Okay.
So look, there's even rules in regulations in all of Victoria at the moment that to go into a retail shop, you have to be double vaxxed. Apart
Are
from,
there ID cards for this, or I mean, how do they know?
well, we have an app on our phone. So to go into a shop, we check in with the app. So a record is kept of what shop we've been into, and there's a digital certificate on the phone. So there's someone at the door of the shop checking to see that you've checked in, and checking the digital certificate on your phone to make sure that you are double vaxxed.
Now, did I hear you right? You called it an air phone?
Uh, Mobile phone.
Oh,
Yeah, we tend not. Yeah, we tend to use the term mobile phone here rather than cell phone, which you
okay.
call your devices in the States. Yeah.
Oh, I thought I heard you say air phone, and I thought, well, that's another expression I haven't heard.
No, 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 it's all right.
Of course, in England, they say mobile,
Mobile. Yeah, yeah,
a mobile phone.
yeah.
Well, you've what other callings have you had in the church?
Oh, High Council. I've served on several High Councils. I've served in the bishopric once. I've served as young men president 3 times, ward mission leader. In the old days, stake mission president. When I came home from my mission, I was ward mission leader and stake mission president,
Oh,
or senior president of 70s in the
mm-hmm.
stake. You would remember those days, Richard.
Yes, yep,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, uh, I've taught seminary, not a full year of seminary, but I have taught seminary.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had lots of different callings. Never
Yeah.
served as a bishop. Never served as a bishop. I've been spared that challenge.
Yeah, that's not a calling one. Um, I don't know what's the word. It's not a calling one.
Aspires to.
Yeah, aspires to. Yeah, aspires to. because it's so much work involved.
Oh,
After somebody serves as a bishop, they go, "Well, it was a great calling, and I learned a lot." But boy, usually when people in our family or something are called as a bishop, I say, "I'm so sorry," because I know what's there, waiting for them. But
yeah.
well, now so you've served quite a bit. Now you said you served a mission. Where did you serve?
I served in New Zealand Christchurch Mission,
Oh,
which
okay.
which covered the South Island and the lower part of the North Island.
Uh huh.
The Christchurch Mission doesn't exist as the Christchurch Mission anymore. It's now called the Wellington Mission. Um, that was back in the early 80s, 83,
Okay.
84. So I came into the church as a convert when I was 24 years old in 1981. So I recently had my 40th anniversary in the church,
Oh,
and I served a mission about 18 months later. So it was November 81 I joined the church, and I was in the MTC, I think May 83.
now when you say the MTC, the one in Provo?
No. There's a mission training centre in New Zealand at the Temple View, which is near Hamilton in New Zealand. So we had a small MTC there.
Oh, okay.
Um,
What?
from memory, I'm thinking there might have been maybe 30 or 40 missionaries there, perhaps
Okay.
in
Yeah,
training.
yeah. There's MTCs all over, but I didn't know back
Mm,
that. I didn't know if back that far, if there were that many. I know now there's quite a few, but
mm,
I didn't know if
mm.
they actually flew you up here to attend up here. Well, you've had a lot of experience in the church, and you said you served as a young men's president. They must love you since you're surfing.
Uh, well, you can guess what our major major activities, fun activities were. Was
Yes, I can
surfing,
only
yeah, for
imagine.
sure. Yeah, so I served as a young men's president before I went on my mission, and then in a ward in Melbourne. I lived in Melbourne for about 10 years, so I served up there as a young men's president as well. And then, probably 10 or 15 years ago in Geelong, I served as young men president again. So I was in my mid 50s serving as a young men president.
Hmm.
I was still pretty active. We still went surfing a lot, so that was fun.
Good.
And look, some of the young men that I've taught over the years have actually stayed active in the church, and some of them have served missions.
Good.
And it's a great thing. My wife and I are actually temple workers as well. I should have mentioned before,
Oh,
and so it's thrilling. I've actually had a young man who I taught, a young man who I taught in Sunday school. I've worked under his direction as he was a shift supervisor in the temple.
oh, very
So
good.
that was thrilling, and it was just a great
Yes.
thrill to see other young men that I taught coming into the temple to do some ordinances in the temple.
Yes.
Just a
Well,
great thrill.
well, now you said you were a convert. At what age? It's in your teens, I guess, that you were.
No, I was 24,
Oh, you were
24 years old.
24. Oh, no, no,
I
no, wait a minute. You were 24 when you came in the church. When did you go on a
mm,
mission? At what age?
look, well, I would have been 25 and a half. So I had actually had my 26th and 27th birthdays in the mission.
Okay.
So I was a few years older than most of the young
Yeah,
men
you were
serving.
quite a few years older. You were the senior companion, at least by age.
I was. We used to joke that the only person older than me in the mission was a mission president, but
Yeah.
there, there were actually a couple of
Hmm.
senior couples serving in the mission too, so they beat me as well. But it was interesting coming into the mission, having a little bit more life experience
Yeah,
than
I
most of the
agree.
missionaries.
Yeah. Well, there's a big difference between being 18 and 19 and being 25 and 26.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I'd
yeah,
had a lot. I mean,
yeah.
when I think back now, I think, wow, 24 and I was a missionary. I think how incredibly young I was. Of course,
Yeah.
now looking back 40 years.
Absolutely. Um, well, how did you come into the church then at that age? What happened?
Well, so this was in November, so late October, November that I was taught and baptised. I'd spent that winter leading up to that time. So winter is June, July, August in Australia. I'd spent that winter working at a ski resort. And when I finished that season at the ski resort, I went home to stay at my mother's house in Geelong. And I was just there one day. My mum was at work and I was at home. I think I might have been doing something in the kitchen. No, I'd written a letter, sorry. I'd written a letter to a former girlfriend of mine who had worked at the ski resort as well. And she'd gone back to Queensland and I'd come down to Geelong. And I was writing her a letter. And I wrote the letter and I walked down the street to go to the post office to post the letter. This is a long time ago where you had to actually have to do that. And as I was walking down the street, two missionaries were walking up the other side of the street. And I saw them, and this was the street that I lived in. They were walking up the other side of the street and I saw them and I thought, oh, gee, by the time I get back home, they'll be gone. Anyway, I'm back home and I'm doing something in the kitchen and I hear a knock on the door. And I thought to myself, I bet it's those missionaries. And I went to the door and there were two Mormon missionaries standing at the door. And I listened to them. It was as simple as that. I felt prompted to listen to them. And I can still remember the three questions they asked. The first question was, well, they probably introduced themselves and, said, how are you, or something like that. And they said, do you believe in God? And I said, yes. And they said, do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God? And I said, yes. Then they said, if you knew or if you found out that Jesus Christ had restored his church to the earth, would you want to know about it? And I stopped for a second, and in my mind I thought, gee, I just said yes to the first two questions. If I say no to the third question, I'm going to look pretty stupid, aren't I? So I said, yeah. So I said, yes. Now, I had, and prior to this situation, when I was working up at the snow, I'd had this spiritual experience where I'd been reading a book. I'd been reading a book called The Cosmic Conspiracy, which was basically a conspiracy theory type of book. But at one stage in the book, the person writing the book, a fellow called Stan Deo, who was a Baptist minister, he said, you can save yourself from all this difficult time that's going to happen at the end of the days and the last days before the coming of Christ by signing here. Sign here on this page to say that you believe in Christ and you'll be saved.
Wow.
Yeah, and I didn't ever do that because I just thought that sounds a bit weird. Mm-hmm. I mean, but it convinced me. I'd been raised as a Presbyterian. My parents were not devoutly religious, but we attended church pretty much every Sunday. And I only stopped attending church when I started surfing. Anyway, at the ski resort where I was working, I had an accident. I was working on a chairlift and I had an accident where I really badly hurt my knee. And what was happening the next day, some friends of mine from Queensland, Northern Australia, were coming to go skiing with me and I'd hurt my knee. And more than anything, I wanted to go skiing with these guys the next day. And for the first time in my adult life, I prayed that I would be able to go skiing with my friends the next day. They'd come all the way down from Queensland and we wanted to go off and had a great time together. And I woke up in the morning, my knee was fine, and I went skiing. So I'd had a prayer answered and I was not converted at that stage, but, I knew that God loved me and would hear my prayers and would answer my prayers. And I think Heavenly Father's up there looking down at Murray and saying, this is my big chance. I'm going to make his knee better so he can go surfing. And then when the missionaries come and knock on his door in a few months' time, he'll say yes. So that was the train of events that led to me, being taught by the missionaries. So two missionaries from the United States who I still keep in touch with today, Van Christenham, who is a I think I'm saying his name right. He's on the faculty of BYU Idaho. And Joe Hatch, who lives down in the Mesa Gilbert area in Arizona. Van Christman, the first guy, I only met him once. He was on the plane on the way home the week after they knocked on the door. And he was replaced by a fellow called Rodney Jones from Preston, Idaho. And so Elder Jones and Elder Hatch baptized me within a few weeks. Yeah. And that's how it all happened, all very quickly.
Yes. And how did your parents respond to you joining the church?
Okay, so my parents were separated and divorced when I was probably 16 or 17. And so I didn't tell my mother until after I was baptized. The missionaries would come and teach me during the day while my mum was at work. And so I didn't tell her till afterwards. I was hesitant to tell her. Yeah. And after I was baptized, I did tell her. It might have been a little while later, maybe just a couple of weeks, and she said, "Oh, I wish you had told me because I've never seen anyone being baptized by immersion."
Oh, she would have liked to have been there.
Yeah, so my mother never joined the church, but she became very softened towards the church. I mean, I grew up knowing that you didn't talk to Mormon missionaries. They were strange. They were weird sort of guys from the States, and you don't talk to them. But my mother became quite softened towards the church. She came to the temple open house when the Melbourne temple was dedicated, and she said to me later, she was quite elderly by this stage. She was, late 70s, early 80s, perhaps, when the temple was dedicated, and she said it had a profound effect on her, just going to the open house. So she still didn't get baptized. I mean, it was late in life, and she actually became more active in the Uniting Church, which was formed from the Presbyterian Church and other churches many years ago. So she became more active in her own church in her later years, which was good. My father, on the other hand, he didn't react at all. He was taught by the missionaries early on. When I came home from my mission and I was serving as ward mission leader, he was taught by the missionaries. And I always remember, them drawing the diagram of the plan of salvation and the 3 degrees of glory at the end there, the celestial, terrestrial, celestial, and the missionaries describing that to him. And he points to the bottom one and says, what's that one there? The telestial, and what's that one like? The missionaries described that. They said, "That'll do me." That's good enough for me. But let me tell you, Richard, something exciting. Towards the end of his life, when he remarried following my parents' divorce, my dad remarried, and he and his wife Norma were married for a long time. I guess it must have been 40 years or more. And Norma became unwell as she got older, and she ended up being placed in an aged care home, which was relatively near to where Margaret and I live. And my dad went there into the same aged care home as she did, but he was too active. He was probably 87, 88 at the stage. He was too active to really fit in the aged care home. So we took him out of there and had him come and live at our place. And while he was living at our place, we would always have the missionaries come around once a week for dinner. And he started asking questions, and I baptized my father some time after that. And I really did very little. He just kept on asking questions. He wanted to be part of it. He saw how we lived our life in the home. He would sit there reading the Book of Mormon. We had members come and visit, because this was just what we did. And he just wanted to be part of it. I did nothing to encourage him. because I didn't want to. I'm a salesman. I can convince people that they should be doing certain things or buying certain things or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I do. But I didn't want anyone saying, oh, you've forced him into it or you've brainwashed him
Right.
or
Yeah.
anything like that. It was all his
Yeah.
decision. So,
Well, basically, you were following the advice that they're giving us now as to what invite to. I can't remember the order of it. Is it love, invite, and
mm,
there's a third step there, and I'm sorry I can't remember it.
neither can I.
But yeah, but you were just following what they're counseling us to do now.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, turning to the scriptures, how do you study the scriptures?
Well, look, I guess everyone has their own methods and own habits and everything in scripture study. What I tend to do mostly, so my wife is a return missionary as well. So we both have our habits, I guess, that we've developed over the years, and we have our own personal study of the scriptures, and we have our companionship study of the scriptures almost every day. Occasionally we miss out. And my habit is that I wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes 2 or 3 in the morning, for the same reason that most men of my age wake up in the middle of the night.
Okay.
And when I get back into bed, I tend to be wide awake, and I have a little bit of trouble getting back to sleep. So I have a little Samsung Galaxy Tab, a little 8-inch Samsung Galaxy Tab under my pillow, and I open it up and I sort of pull the sheets over my head and study the scriptures in bed in the middle of the night, usually 2 or 3 in the morning. And, I usually do that until I start to get tired again and feel like, yep, I think I can go back to sleep now. And so that's my scripture study time, my personal scripture study time. And then when I wake up again, when I wake up at about 7 o'clock, I do a little bit more study. Then I have my personal prayer, and then I get out of bed. So I'm a little bit slack. I don't kneel by the bed to say my personal prayer.
Yeah.
I sort of kneel on the bed with the blankets over me, keeping warm, to say my personal prayer. And I don't think Heavenly Father minds that too much,
Yes. Well, now you said you keep that tab, Samsung Tab, under your pillow, so you literally use the scriptures as a pillow.
Well, it's sort of just to the side.
Yeah, I know it's underneath, but
but
yeah, it's but I thought, well, that's interesting. I wonder if you have certain dreams because you rest your head on the pillow or your head on the scriptures there. So okay, that's the way you do it. Now, do you record anything or do you highlight? What are you doing?
Okay, so I obviously use the Gospel Library app, and listening to your podcast, Richard, has converted me to really using the Gospel Library app way better than I used to. Way better. So yes, I do tag and take notes in the scriptures there. But look, I'm an old school missionary. When I served my mission, we were still memorizing everything. You'd remember the old, what we used to call the rainbow discussions, the folder of discussions, and every discussion was a different color. I was in the generation after that, where that method had been put aside and the new discussions had been put together, but we were still memorizing everything, but not as much as we did. And so memorizing scriptures was also a big part of my scripture study. So I do use the Gospel Library app, but I don't use it very much just to read the scriptures. I tend to use it more in the car when I'm driving to listen to the scriptures. I like to use that feature of the Gospel Library app where you can listen to any chapter and verse that you want to.
Yes.
And so I have a half-hour drive to the shop down in Torquay, and I'll use that half hour to listen to the Book of Mormon or listen to a conference talk or that sort of thing. But one thing that always happens always happens, particularly when I listen to the Book of Mormon, is that I don't listen to it for very long when I get prompted to phone someone. I get a prompting that, oh, you haven't talked to so-and-so for a little while. And it could be another church member. It could be someone on my ministering list. It could be an old friend who lives interstate. It could be a non-member. Who knows? But I get this prompting to call someone. And so I end up.
And do you act on that? Do you act on that prompting right away, or what do you do?
I do it straight away.
Right away.
I do it straight away. So
Wow.
I use Google Voice. I say, "Hey Google, call so and so," and so I can do it all very easily. I usually I'm wearing headphones, and half the time people don't even know I'm driving while I'm talking. And so I've got that half-hour time to fill. So I'm listening to the scriptures and calling people when I'm driving home. And a lot of times I'll get home and I'll pull into the driveway, into the carport, and I'm actually still talking to someone and sitting in the car for a few minutes before I say, "Hey, I've just arrived home. I need to go in and I'm getting hungry, and Margot will have dinner ready for me. I'm going to go inside." But, it's just a great way to catch up with people and talk.
Yes,
okay, but back to the study in the middle of the night. I tend to use Kindle quite a bit, probably more in the middle of the night. I'll use Kindle more than the Gospel Library because I'll be reading books that I've purchased on Kindle. The book I'm reading at the moment is one called Understanding the Book of Mormon by Grant Hardy. Maybe you've heard.
Oh, okay.
He's a professor of something or other at some university in the US, and he's written this book called Understanding the Book of Mormon. He's also written he's edited what he calls the Reader's Edition of the Book of Mormon. So he's taken the Book of Mormon, and instead of it being all in chapter and verse,
I've seen that. I've seen that book.
He's put into paragraphs, and it's so much easier to read.
Yeah.
So much easier to read.
Well, I don't know if you have a copy of the original edition. When I say original edition, a copy of the original edition, not the not the original printed.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. It's very easy to buy that, and it reads more like a novel.
Yeah. I haven't seen it, but I understand that's what it's like. And In fact, I was taught at BYU Education Week. Somebody, can't remember which professor it was, but he said that quite often we should go to that original edition and read, because like King Benjamin's talk is 2 or 3 chapters in the Book of Mormon, and it's all one chapter, and it just flows better. It helps you to see the context of the whole talk, where when we tend to divide it up into verses and chapters, it kind of destroys the flow. And so occasionally I will, in fact, I even have a digital copy of that now, and occasionally I will go to that and reread it that way, because it does read more like a story, and you can kind of see the whole context of what he was doing. So, yeah. But I've seen the book by Hardy that you've been talking about. I've seen that. There is actually another version. Someone else has done something similar to that, but Brother Hardy's book, Understanding the Book of Mormon, is awesome in that he breaks it down to a narration level and says, okay, we've got 3 main narrators in the Book of Mormon. We've got Nephi, Mormon, and Moroni. They're the main narrators, and he compares their different styles and why they did certain things and everything. And that is just a fantastic book. I can't recommend it strongly enough,
All right. Well, it's been very interesting talking to you. Now, but something just crossed my mind.
Sure.
Your wife, Margot, does she use the Gospel Library?
She's beginning to.
Okay.
She's very much still using a paper scriptures and the paper edition of the Ensign to study the scriptures. But as we're going on a mission next year, she knows she's going to need to use the Gospel Library app a fair bit more, and so she's getting used to it. She's not totally she's not totally backwards using mobile devices, but she's getting better, and she's starting to do
Okay.
things. She's using Facebook Messenger now to contact people and things like that. So
Okay.
she's getting
All
better.
right.
A couple of other apps that we do use though for our study of the scriptures. I use the app that the seminary students use, the Doctrinal Mastery app. I
Okay.
use that
Mm-hmm.
because to me, studying the scriptures means getting them into my mind, and so I
Mm-hmm.
still like to memorize things. And so
Okay.
I've tried to memorize the proclamation on the family, the testimony of the 12 apostles on
Yes.
the living Christ. I've tried to memorize the latest proclamation on the restoration of the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it terribly hard to memorize things now that I'm older. Uh, but
Oh,
I try to, because memorizing things to me is just the way that I really begin to
yeah.
understand the scriptures and focus on certain words and things like that. And I have
Yeah.
things come into my mind as I memorize them, applications for different verses perhaps or whatever, So that's what I do. So
Yes.
the Doctrinal Mastery app, and there's a link you can share scriptures from the Gospel Library, and so you can load
Yes.
scriptures from the Gospel Library into Doctrinal Mastery, and so you can
Correct.
add to your list of scriptures that you're memorizing there. And I use the quiz and the flashcards in there to,
Uh-huh.
I'm more into these days not learning the verses word for word, although a lot I still remember from my mission. But newer ones, I tend just to memorize the reference, the chapter and verse that it can be found at,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
the general topic of that scripture.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. No, memorization is a great way, and that is a great app. I'm very familiar with it.
Mm,
And no, it's a good one. I don't use it. I'm familiar with it. I teach the use of it for those that like it.
mm.
I just found that with my dyslexia, I have tried and tried to memorize over the years, even when I was a young man. And there were poems that I memorized, and unless I was repeating it every single week,
Mm.
I would just quickly lose it, and so I finally gave up. And the digital scriptures is my answer, because with
Okay.
tagging and everything, I can turn to whatever I want whenever I need, and find what I want. But
Yeah.
no, I admire the people that can memorize. I really do.
Sorry, Richard, sorry to cut you off, but I've never heard you say before that you're dyslexic.
Well, if you hear all the podcasts, it'll probably come out. I am dyslexic.
Mm.
I'm not so severely dyslexic that I can't read. In fact, I can read, and most people would think I'm not even dyslexic. But the problem is, I can actually read a paragraph for somebody and not understand a single thing it just said. But they'll go, and that's where I had trouble in school. They would have me read, and then they'd say, well, and I would go, well, I have to reread it again. And even today, I was, what am I reading now? God Shall Prevail, by Molstein. I'm rereading that.
Hmm.
And several times I've got to read that paragraph again and again and again, or the sentence, until it go, okay, now I understand what he's saying. So yeah, and I found that it did affect my memorization skills, and I just have never been able to. And I really admire people that can memorize.
Mm.
I really do. It's something that I wish that I could do, because it's just I think it's a great skill, and anciently that's the way things were passed on.
That's right.
People didn't write things down; they passed it on.
Mm.
But I just don't seem to have that particular skill. So, but I think it's a great skill to have, and yes, it's a great way to, as you're driving or something, to review those things. And
Mm.
it is a great app. It really is, because it's got the flashcards in it, and as you said, you can bring things over from the Gospel Library. So
Mm.
I recommend it to anybody that is able to memorize.
Mm.
Well, it's been very interesting talking to you, and I'm going to have to see who else I can talk to down in Australia.
Oh, look, there are some interesting people down here. I can tell you. I can tell
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Richard, something you haven't asked me about,
Yes. Well, what haven't I asked you?
which I want to tell you about, is what my wife and I have been through trying to get organised to go on a mission. it's been a difficult time.
Well, are you going to sell your house, or what are you doing?
Oh, well, no, we're not going to sell our house. We're hoping to rent our house out. So we need to empty it out so that it's available for someone to rent. So
Right.
because when we serve our mission, we'll be paying rent on wherever we live. So we need to have rent coming in from our house here so that we have
Right.
money to pay the rent there. But we started to look at serving a mission at the start of 2020. And so we started to look at what we need to do to, do all the necessary paperwork in inverted commas. It's all online. And I went to Thailand. We had a short holiday in Thailand, so I could get my teeth fixed up. I needed some work done on my teeth, and a lot of Australians do this. We travel to Thailand, where the dental work is very professional and a lot cheaper than Australia. We have a little holiday in Thailand, and we fly home. As we were flying back into Australia, or through Singapore, actually, they were checking temperatures of people because this was right at the start of COVID, and so we had everything submitted at the start of last year, and everything was shut down. We didn't get our mission call. This was at the time when missionaries were getting sent home. Everything was closing down, and so this was prior to getting our mission call. And so we just had to sit it out for 12 months or so. Then at the start of this year, we looked at resubmitting our missionary recommendation, and we did that. We actually had to redo some of the medical because it was over 12 months, so we had to redo some of the medical examinations and submit that as well. We did that, and there were some delays in doing that, but we got it done, and we actually received our mission call to serve in the Brisbane, Australia mission, which we were thrilled about. We wanted to stay in Australia. We didn't really want to go anywhere. And so we received that call, and I think we were called to enter the MTC in about July of this year. And so we looked at that and we thought, yeah, we think we can do that. Anyway, about that time, I was talking to my older daughter, the musical one, and she's had health challenges all her life. When she was 19 years old, she was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune disease. And anyway, she said, "Dad, I'm having some examinations, and the doctors seem to think it's okay. I've had some tests, but I need to have a biopsy. I have a lump in my breast." And the doctors, everyone's saying they think it's okay. It doesn't feel bad or anything. And she was quite confident it was all going to be okay. And she had the biopsy, and the results of the biopsy came back saying it was a cancerous lump in her breast. So that, it's not the sort of thing any parent wants to hear.
Right.
And so you can imagine that, that, sort of turned our lives upside down a little bit. She's had what's called a lumpectomy. She's had chemotherapy, and she's just started, just this week, she's had a first treatment of radiation therapy, and that will be 5 days a week for the next 4 or 5 weeks. So, she'll finish her therapy leading up to Christmas, close to Christmas. And yeah, so that I don't want to say, but it did. It sort of threw a spanner in the works for our plans, which wasn't, that wasn't the first thing we thought of course, when she told us that was what was going on. Our main concern, of course, was for her and what she was going through and everything. But we'd been talking about serving a mission for a long, long time. prior to our putting our papers in, I'd wanted to serve a mission. Margot was a little bit more hesitant. She wanted to make sure, our family was settled. She wanted Miriam to come back from her mission. I actually wanted to serve a mission at the same time Miriam was serving her mission, but that didn't work out. And I have an older sister. My older sister was diagnosed with breast cancer many years ago as well, and so she'd been through all the same treatments that my daughter's gone through now, and her cancer has metastasized, and so she has breast cancer in other parts of her body now. Right. So we were waiting for her to be settled before we would think seriously about, and she's quite stable now. If you saw her, you wouldn't think there was anything wrong with her, but she suffers. She has low energy, and she's not leading a 100% normal life. She needs a certain amount of help. Right. She's quite stable. Yep. So we've had various reasons over the years why we haven't been able to serve a mission. But I guess what I wanted to say about all that is that eventually things can work out where you can. And the church has made available various ways of serving a mission, such as service missions these days where you can serve from home. But both Margot and I, being old-time missionaries who had been away from home to serve missions, we both felt that we wanted to get away from home to serve a mission. And it's a hard thing to do. There's a lot of things that you need to do to get to that point where you can, and you have to make certain decisions along the way so that you can do that. But it's not easy, and there are actually very few senior couples in Australia who do get to that point where they can get away from home to serve a mission. We have couples in our ward serving as service missionaries. There's two or three couples in our ward are doing that at the moment, or have done that recently, and that's fantastic. But we just wanted to get away. We wanted to get away from home and serve what we call a proper mission. I don't want to say that to denigrate anyone. There's nothing wrong with serving a service mission. We'll probably do that when we come home from our full-time mission. But that's what we wanted to do. Margot and I are both old-fashioned. We served missionaries when we were young, and we want to do that thing again. Get out and do it again.
Well, where are you going to be serving?
So the Brisbane, Australia mission.
Okay.
Which covers a huge area. It covers it covers the whole state of Queensland, plus it covers some of northern New South Wales. It covers an area bigger than Texas. Let's say it's bigger than Texas.
Oh, okay. That's pretty big.
It's if you think of the Australian mainland as being about the same size as mainland US. It's about the same size, and we have 6 states and 2 territories. We don't have 50 states. Queensland, it's a huge area. It's huge. I mean, to drive from the southern point of Queensland to the northern point of Queensland, it's probably a 2-day drive, and you probably can't. It's just an enormous area. Enormous. Yeah.
Well, like I said in the beginning, Australia is huge. All you have to do is take Australia and lay it across the United States, and you get a feel for how big it really is.
Yeah.
It's and I know a lot of it is desert and all of that, but still it's a big island. I don't know what else to call it, but it's huge. It really is huge. Well, I've enjoyed the time with you, and you probably know by now that I always ask my guests to bear their testimony. So would you mind doing that?
Oh, yes. Yes. Look, I've been thinking about how I might say this to you at this time. Obviously, I've listened to a lot of your podcasts, Richard, and one of the most recent ones I've just listened to was the 2 senior ladies you interviewed just recently. And
Mary Ellen and Gracia.
Yeah, and one of them was a descendant of the prophet Joseph Smith.
Yep.
And
Yep.
hearing her bear her testimony was just, wow. I was thinking, gee, Richard's going to ask me the same question.
Yes, I am.
So look, when those two missionaries knocked on my door and taught me about the prophet Joseph Smith and taught me about the Book of Mormon, and they showed me a picture of the 12 and the first presidency of the church. I felt prompted to listen to them at that stage. I'd had missionaries knock on the door prior to that time, many times. I don't know how many times prior. It was like I was being hunted down. I knew it wasn't the case, but I felt prompted to listen to them. I went inside with the Book of Mormon, and I read it straight away. I didn't read all of it. I just read the parts that they suggested I read, and I prayed about it straight away. I wanted to know straight away if the Book of Mormon was true, and I felt the voice of God coming into my mind saying, it's true, follow these young men and you can't go wrong. So that was how I received my initial witness that the Book of Mormon is true, and that the prophet Joseph Smith really was a prophet of God, just like the prophets that I'd learned about when I was a child going to the Presbyterian church. So I knew that right from the start, and I was baptized a short time afterwards and served a mission, as we've already talked about. And many, many times over the course of my mission, over the course of my life in the church, since I've been home from my mission, my married life, many, many times, dozens of times, maybe hundreds of times, I don't know, I felt the Spirit bear witness to me that what I am a part of, what I have become as I've been a member of the church, it's all true. It's amazing and it's true, and I can understand why people would hear this story and think, one of the things I initially thought was, Americans, they think they're the best at everything, and now they think they have the best church, So, I know it's true, and I've educated myself. I know and have read many, many things that we would call anti-Mormon literature. I've read it all, and I keep on reading, and I know there's answers to all those questions, all the questions people have that might bring them to doubt the reality, the truthfulness of the church. There are answers to all those questions. You just have to keep on reading, and you'll find the answers. So, I know God lives. I know He answers our prayers, and I know Jesus Christ is our Saviour and His Son, and I know He's restored the church to the earth through the prophet Joseph Smith, and our prophet today, Russell M. Nelson, is a real prophet. He might be a heart surgeon, or used to be a heart surgeon, but more importantly, he's a prophet of God. And I say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.